to Regulated and Relational, the bi-monthly podcast of the Attachment and Trauma Network. Today, Julie and Ginger are talking with Ce Eshelman, an attachment and trauma specialist, author, and adoptive mom, about therapeutic parenting, what it is, and why it's important. Let's join in the conversation.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Regulated and Relational, our podcast produced by the Attachment and Trauma Network. I'm Ginger Healy.
And I'm Julie Beem.
And we're excited to share with you from both our personal experiences and our professional knowledge what it truly means to be attachment-focused, trauma-informed, and how we can help children impacted by early childhood trauma. Today, we've asked an expert in therapeutic parenting to come to the studio and a longtime friend of ATN, Ce Eshelman. Welcome, Ce.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
Nice we're so happy. Happy to have you here. And we're going to talk about all things therapeutic caregiving, how to support families dealing with the impacts of trauma. Before we dive in, let's have Julie introduce you to our audience, Ce.
Of course. Ce Eshelman is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's a seasoned attachment and trauma specialist, an adoptive parent, and the founder of the Attachment Play Center for Strengthening Relationships in Sacramento, California. With over 35 years of experience, which is hard to do when she's only 40. Over 35 years of experience in therapeutic parenting and attachment-focused therapy, Ce is also the creator of the Love Matters Parenting Program, which supports parents raising children with early trauma histories. She's the author of Drowning with My Hair on Fire, Insanity Relief for Adoptive Parents, and 20 Things Children from Difficult Beginnings Wish Friends and Family Knew. Ce brings deep clinical experience, lived experience, and an incredible ability to translate complex trauma into compassionate, actionable parenting wisdom. One of the things that we at ATN love about Ce is that she's an adoptive mother, like both Ginger and I, and we feel like she gets it on such a personal level as well as a professional level. So tell us what inspired you to specialize in attachment and trauma therapy, and how has your own experience as an adoptive parent shaped that work?
Well, first of all, you make me sound so good. I like myself a lot when I hear you talk about me.
You want to hear this woman talk, don't you?
Yeah. Oh, let's see. Well, my kids inspired me. So when I adopted my kids, it was 27 almost years ago, 26, I guess. And trauma informed, it was a thing somewhere, I'm sure, but it wasn't on the ground level. I was a therapist at the time for 15 years. I heard nothing about that before, really. Then I got my kids, and I was like, oh, something's not right here. I don't know what it is, but it's not working. All the things I think don't work. And so that was really the beginning. I wasn't intending to be an attachment and trauma specialist ever. I mean, it wasn't a thing back then. But I needed help and there wasn't any. And the help that I did get was just in the therapy office, a certain kind of therapy that wasn't all that useful either. And then when I asked that therapist, okay, but what do I do at home? How do I parent my kids? And the therapist said, oh, I don't know. I don't do parenting. I just do the therapy. And that was it. I was like, yeah, I don't need therapy. I
need help for what's happening the rest of the hours of the week, right?
Right. Totally.
Which are a lot.
Yes, a lot. And also the most important. And I really come to know that over the years. So my kids were my inspiration. I didn't really learn therapeutic parenting until midway through their time with me in childhood. And then I was trying to repair the pain that I caused them from using traditional parenting on them for the last half of parenting them in their childhood. They've forgiven me. They're older now. They're 23 7 and 30 now, and they have forgiven me,
Mm.
and they also don't think I was that bad. So that always makes me feel good. I know they
That's
just can't
good.
remember. I know they can't remember, but that's all right.
Mhm.
Well, I think that Julie and I could have both said word for word, we've had to apologize for all the things we didn't know.
Mhm.
And I've had that conversation too with my son, and he has forgiven me. And, some would say, well, maybe he that wasn't necessary, but for me, it was. I needed that so that I could keep going and move on and do things differently because yeah, we did not know. There was no preparation. There was preparation as part of the adoption process, but not this
Not that
preparation.
kind of preparation. Yeah.
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 Yeah, not what you needed.
Right.
Or and you did, I don't even know, maybe at the time they, the adoption folks didn't know
I don't
either.
think they knew either.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, I worked in the international adoption field for 15 years.
Mhm.
I worked hard. I did my very best, but I also was not trained we didn't know. So I think we all did our best and continue to do our best. And I'm so grateful to be on this other side. And let's talk about what that therapeutic parenting is, what it looks like, how that differs from those traditional approaches that didn't work.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm having this interesting experience right now. I have never tried to really advertise my online therapeutic parenting program the way I am now.
Mhm.
So it's really this sort of big push, and it's an interesting process for me. But one of the things that keeps happening is that I am saying in my advertising, that traditional parenting doesn't work for kids who come from difficult beginnings because their brains are different. And the amount of anger that I
Mm,
get back from people who insist that you have to traditionally parent and that kids need to be shown, um, who has the power, and that their kids have to obey, and that otherwise we're creating, little monsters, little tyrants. And I'm like, well, it doesn't. Therapeutic parenting doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries and limits and use
Right.
natural consequences and teach your children and all of that.
Right.
It doesn't mean no parenting. It's a specific kind of parenting that's brain first, right? We pay more attention
right.
to the brain and less attention to the behavior per se. The behavior is just communication in the therapeutic parenting world, right?
Right.
But but it's communication about what's happening in their brain, and
Right.
then using the right tools in the right order with the right timing. And the tools are therapeutic in nature. They're not traditional in nature. And people are like, well, what does that really mean? I'm like, well, you don't ratchet up your punishment, every second if it's not working, right?
Mhm.
You restrain yourself a little. you
Mhm.
A
and
lot. Yeah.
you don't use punishment when you can, right? You use regulation, you use more strategy and more understanding, empathy. I use Dan Hughes's model, which is PACE, right?
Yep.
Playful,
Very much.
accepting, curious, and empathic.
Mhm.
I mean, that is how to engage a child who is having trouble around you. They're not giving you trouble. They're right.
Right. They're, yeah,
They're
they're
having
having
trouble.
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 Right.
They're
Yeah.
struggling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did I answer your question? What's
Yes.
the difference? Yeah, there's a real difference. And it's really successful. That's the other thing. I just want to say to people, people are afraid sometimes when they come into my program because they don't know yet. They're like, well, what if this doesn't work? I'm like, this works because it's about people. It's about connection. It's about love. It's what love really is intended to be. I don't know when it got sort of warped into it's about um, making kids be productive citizens in a cookie cutter world when our kids just don't come to us like little cookie cutters,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's just about seeing them for who they are, what's happened to them, and how we can accommodate and support them into whatever life they're going to lead. Not
Mhm.
the one we choose, but the one they choose for themselves.
Mhm.
And we of course we'll use guidance and support and love, but love just means that, right? Support to become the people they're intended to be. They have a trajectory of their own, and we can't tell when they're 5 years old what that's going to be.
Right, for sure, for sure. And when parents come to you and they ask you and they say things like, what if this doesn't work? But aren't they usually coming to you after having tried a lot of things that maybe didn't
It's
work?
not working
Right?
now. Yeah.
Totally. And that is actually what we conclude. I'm like, oh, well, is what you're doing working? No. Has it ever worked? Yes, at least once it's worked. And I'm like, well, were they scared? Yep. Okay, you're
Mhm.
right. It will
Okay.
work.
You scared
It
them
will work
once.
if you scare them
Mhm.
for a little while, but then their bodies will get bigger and they'll scare you. So you got to
Mhm.
think about what you're doing with the little ones so that when they get a little bigger, they don't turn it on you.
Mhm.
And that's a weird thought, I think, but it's actually true. When kids hit adolescence or puberty and they start, feeling their oats, as it were,
Mhm.
or their agency,
Mhm.
their bodies are
Right.
bigger, their minds are broader, they can take action in ways they couldn't when they were 5 or 6.
Right. Right. Yeah. And if what they've seen is that the power has that like power and control are the focus, then that's what they're going to lean towards, is to figure out the power and control. Where if relationship and connection and regulation is the focus, then yeah, things are going to be different.
Right. I always tell parents, be the parent you want your kids to turn out to be.
Oh, that's a good one.
And
Yeah.
I mean, don't we want loving children? I was talking to a parent the other day, and I did have to bring her to tears, I'm afraid, but I didn't mean to. But I was just telling her, I said, what do you think parenting is all about? And she said something like, well, making my kids productive members of society. And I'm like, okay, that's a good thought.
Mhm.
And I said, but what if it's just to have your child feel loved, lovable, and loving? What if those are the three things you thought you had to do in terms of being with your child and doing all that's it? Like, that's
Mhm.
all parenting is ultimately. Because
Yeah,
if your child feels lovable, is loving, and can receive love, for example, they're going to do fine in the world,
they are going
right?
to be successful
They will be
members of
successful.
society. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that
Well,
just stopped the conversation a little bit there.
Mhm.
um, I love, I love, I was going to dive into this word love because you use it a lot and you embody that. And in fact, your podcast is called Love Unmuted, which I think is really a beautiful, powerful way to lean in,
Oh,
to
I think it
lean
is
into
too.
what it really
Mhm.
means. What does that look like?
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you want to talk about that, but
I
I'm
do. I love to talk about love because, people always say, well, love's not enough. And I'm like, absolutely, love's not enough because more than love is required for sure.
Mhm.
And know what love is, right? What is love? And then that takes me back to, we're all wired for attachment and love, right?
Yes.
And so
yes.
we're wired for that. If we're wired for that, why would we ever give that up?
Mhm.
Right. So to me, it's about learning what staying attached, being loving means, showing up and thinking of the other person as a person,
Mhm.
right? So if you show up with your child and you love them enough to see them as a person with feelings and um, a mind of their own and desires of their own and all that.
Mhm.
That's love to me, right? Where you really see them and you honor who they are. Now, of course, you know, if you have a 5-year-old, they're going to want a cookie every hour probably, and you can't honor every wish your child has,
Right.
but that's not the same thing as honoring them as people. And when you do say no to the seventh cookie or second, you you say it with love, right? And empathy. Like, I know you really want that cookie, sweetheart. I get it. And you can have another one tomorrow, but right now you kind of reach the max on the sugar. And so I'm sorry I have to say no, right? That's treating that little child like they matter and their feelings matter, but also having a boundary and knowing what's better for them than they know for themselves. That's fine. But how you administer it, how you share it is really matters, right?
Yeah.
Love matters in that regard. And it all the way through the teen years, all of that. If you start that early, then when you get to those teen years where they get that agency, your relationship is about love. And it's not about utilitarian things like come home when I tell you, do what I tell you, clean your room, don't do anything wrong or bad.
Mhm.
Basically, do what I tell you when I tell you. That's utilitarian parenting. And I think we all grew up with some version of that. And everybody has to do some version of that. It's not like that doesn't have a place. It
Right.
just can't be, it can't be the only place, right? We have to have love in there and have to have the mindset to see our children and our teenagers as real people with real needs and desires of their own.
Exactly. Exactly. No, as you were describing all that, I was thinking it's definitely a great example of therapeutic parenting, but it's also the kind of parenting I would hope for all children, actually.
Yes, of course.
You know,
Of course.
that they know that somebody that they're loved and they're lovable and that they can be loving, because we see all the research out there saying that, the scales are saying that we lack empathy, and especially the younger generations, and there's not as much compassion as there used to be. But if we don't feel loved, lovable, and loving, we can't get to empathy in any way, shape, or form. And that's it's so important.
And our kids have to experience it to give it. I had a parent this morning, a beautiful woman who's, out of the goodness of her heart has just adopted two young children. And she was saying, they don't love me. And I'm like, how long have you had them? She said, well, 3-4 months. And I'm like, well, don't you think that's slightly unreasonable? I mean, maybe you've fallen madly in love with somebody in 3 months, but maybe it was just like madly in like, and it took a while for love to grow, probably, right? This is going to be that. Kids don't instantly love strangers or other people,
Right.
Well, it speaks to, and you have been hitting on this as well, as our agenda versus what the child needs, right? And that's hard. Maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but
No.
it is hard to give up control in certain areas and to really lean into what is best, what is right, what this child needs. I mean, I love that you talked about the boundaries and the rules, because we always say you've got to, of course, have the nurture, but the structure, you have to have both. One heavy on one side or the other, results in chaos. So, you're just hitting on a lot of really important points here that I want to make sure everybody hears.
Yeah, one of the things that's happening too in this advertising spree I'm on, it's across the country, right? So I live in California, but I'm talking to people all over the country, and I really have never done that. Because I never advertised across the country, I really just worked in my small circle until 6 years or so ago. But this push has just been in the last year of advertising, where I talk to people from a lot of places, and I really thought that trauma informed and therapeutic parenting was deeper and had trickled down further than I'm experiencing. And there are programs like yours. You would think that just people would be soaking that up, and there's feels to me like there's a lot. But when I talk to people, it's not where they are. It's not on the ground where they are, or they're hearing words like trauma informed, but
They don't know.
that has meant teaching you that trauma is there, and that the brain works like this survival brain, teaching them about survival brain, but still not enough teaching parents how to therapeutically parent the children.
Right.
So the parents are understanding that there's something there from trauma, but still no true understanding for how to parent it. And I'm seeing that a lot. And I'm just shocked, kind of, because I really had this notion that trauma informed was a thing now. And maybe I was going to be out of business probably soon. because I don't have to reach out and teach people anymore because it's there, but I'm not finding that.
No, I think that I think that that's very true, that we experience that with the educators too, to a certain extent, that everybody has, not everybody, but a bigger group of people have the understanding of when brains are traumatized, when the toxic stress happens, here's what happens. And yeah, behaviors are the communication of what's going on in those brain states. But the flip of that, of what to do about it and how to consistently do it and how to shift your own mindset and beliefs, that's the crux of the challenge, I think. And that's the piece that often doesn't translate in some trainings, and isn't, it's like you don't go there until you need to go there as a parent or an educator, and then you're not sure what to do. How do I shift everything that I know about parenting and do it differently, right? That's
Absolutely. One of the things, my program's a year long, and sometimes when people hear that, they're like, a year?
Wow, that's,
I'm like, yeah, because here's the thing. I'm asking you to make a complete paradigm shift, to move completely out of traditional parenting and into therapeutic parenting, which is a whole different paradigm. Not only that, but I'm asking you to shift what you think about yourself, what you think about children, what you think about adults in children's lives, what you think about brains, what you think of, what you think about school, I'm asking you to really look at your children. And that's going to take you longer than 6 weeks in a course, right? And you're going to need a lot of support from people who are going through it too, who are on the same page, who, when they give you feedback, it's not traditional feedback, it's therapeutic feedback. Try this therapeutic thing, connect with them this way, in this therapeutic way, then work on this. It's a game changer, but a year's a long time. But you're going to have your kids a really long time. You're going to have them way longer than till they're 18 too, and they need you to be therapeutic all the way through. They're growing up, which is long into their late 20s, and a year in your life, a year in your kids' lives is actually just dropping the bucket. So it's worth it.
And that year is going to pass either way, right? And so
true.
I love, more support. And you're also hitting on something that I really want to talk about, which is, it's not that we're fixing the kids and the kids are the problem and you're still who you are. It's the kids that we got to look at. It's like, we're a family system and we have to change. You talked about this paradigm shift, but you also mentioned you're going to need help. You're going to need support. And I'm sure the three of us as adoptive parents and just parents, we had no idea how physically demanding parenting was, how emotionally draining parenting was, how wonderful it is, and how we need help and we need support and we need resources. And especially when it comes to therapeutic parenting, like, I'm still on this journey of realizing what triggers me, what bothers me, and how that reflects in my reactions and my responses to my kids. That it starts with me. I got to fix me before I can look at my kids,
or at least be aware of you and of the difference that you're making.
Yes.
Well, and that sort of brings into the conversation in my mind is how important it is for people who are thinking about adopting or even who have already adopted, looking at your own childhood history. In my program, the first 3 months is all about the parents. What happened to you? What do you bring to this relationship? How were you parented? What are your beliefs about parents and children? What are your triggers from childhood? What are your wounds that are still wounded, right? Those kinds of things. That's the first 3 months. That's all we do. People are like, no, I came here for the tools. I'm like, well, that's in quarter 3. You're not getting that until you fix you, right? So because it won't work.
Those kids
so I tell them,
are going to crack you wide open.
Just
right?
give me what to do. Well, it's not.
I know. I'm like, well, these are just tools. Get a book. If you want that, just buy any one of these 5 books, and you can have quarter 3 right now, and they won't work. I promise they won't work. Well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, because you're still going to be you. And you bring stuff to this table, and you're the most important person in this child's life.
Right.
And I don't care what you think. I don't care what your kid says, right? I know what your kid says, actually. They say you don't matter.
Right.
They
Right.
say, get away from me. They say, you're not my parent. They say, I hate you. They say all that out of their wound. I get that. But that isn't the truth. I am the most important person in my children's life, and they're 27 and 30. And I have been from the beginning. I didn't know it. And so that's a huge message, that if you had trauma in your childhood and you're thinking about adoption, or you have adopted, please, please don't think you can do it alone. It will come out one way or the other. And I swear we get the kids we need. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't choose these 2 for anything that I thought had anything to do with me. But boy, did my avoidant attachment wounds from childhood come into play like almost instantly. And I had to feel that. I had to look at that. Like, why do I just want to go to my room and close the door and leave him out in the living room? I just want to stay, that was my avoidant attachment from childhood that had to be looked at and healed, so that I could actually show up for them and not always be retreating from them. So if you have trauma, do your work. You don't have to go to therapy. You can do your work by doing a lot of things. You can do journaling. You can, there are lots of things online, lots of programs online, lots of things that you can learn. I'm not advocating that everybody do their own therapy, but I know a lot of people are opposed to it, and that's fine, but do it anyway, right? Do some of the processes that are very available to you, and it'll make your parenting so much easier for you.
Oh, amen.
Well, now I think is a good time for us to take a break, but we're talking with Ce Eshelman about therapeutic parenting. And when we come back, I want to hear your thoughts on what others can do to support people on their therapeutic parenting journey, especially extended family and friends, because that's always a challenge. So we'll get back to that.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Cassis. You don't want to miss ATN's Building Resilient Communities for Children virtual conference, June 23rd and 24th. This conference was designed for all adults who work with, care for, and love children. That's right, every one of us. We have 5 tracks: parenting, education, youth justice, community organizations, and counselors and clinicians. But everyone registered can attend any session in any track. Plus, you have 30 days after the conference to view recordings of any or all of the sessions. And did I mention that Dr. Bruce Perry is our opening keynote speaker? He will be talking specifically about how to build resilience. You don't want to miss it. We have brought together many of the best and brightest within ATN's network over the last 30 years. Plus, I'm so excited that we'll be able to offer a discount to nonprofit organizations and special pricing to parents and caregivers. And professionals needing continuing ed can receive CEs and college credit. To see the whole lineup and learn more, visit attachtraumanetwork.org/BRCC or Building Resilient Communities for Children. I'll see you there.
Okay, folks, welcome back. We're talking with Ce Eshelman, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist and an expert in attachment and trauma. She has a program called the Love Matters Parenting Program. It's a highly therapeutic parenting program that we're talking with her about today. And we've talked a lot about what the parents need to do and the shifting that the parents need to make. I know in my journey of becoming a therapeutic parent, I needed folks around me to understand what was happening, because what I was trying to do looked a little foreign to them too. It wasn't traditional parenting. And what do you tell families in this regard in terms of their family members and friends and neighbors and school teachers and all the other folks that they deal with on a daily basis?
Well, that's a great question. Um, I had been hearing parents have so much sadness and despair and loss of family members and friends through the process that they've been in as adopted parents because their friends and family really just didn't understand. They didn't understand the children and they didn't understand the parenting. And in order to continue on the path they knew they needed to be on, they had to cut off from their family and friends, and they end up being very isolated and alone. And that is horrible. That's a horrible feeling, right? Because we need people. We need our people.
Right.
So at a certain point, well, I just wrote a book. I'm like, I'm writing a book about this, not for anybody except the parents I know. And then, now of course it's on Amazon, so you can get it there. But I just put in there from the child's point of view, um, I want to help my parents because I want you to understand them and me. And so I wrote it from a kid's point of view toward family and friends for parents. So it's kind of an interesting reverse on that. So it's dear family and friends. I'm scared of things. These are the things I'm scared of and why. And when you see my parent, it goes like that. So it's a very good description for how in all these letters, there are letters, 20 letters, of how what you're looking at may not be what you think, and that the kind of parenting that is necessary is different than probably what you grew up with, and that the thing your family member who's adopted children from difficult beginnings, what they need the most is understanding. They need understanding and empathy and support. They don't need criticizing. They don't need rebuke. They don't need to be told that they're doing it wrong, that they don't need to be given advice on how to do traditional parenting better. There are just some things that they really do need, and they're very simple to give, which is to withhold your judgment. Let's see, who's the quote from? Oh, Gabor Mate. He has a quote that says, "Love is the absence of judgment." And so I wish I'd put that in my book, actually, now that I think about that. I
That's
didn't.
a great one.
I didn't, but
Second edition.
it's a great quote, and I think that that's what I wish friends and family of adoptive parents or parents from any child who comes from difficult beginnings
Mhm.
would know is that loving this family member is about withholding your judgment,
Mhm.
right? And allowing them to inform you about what they know and what they're learning and why their child is the way they are, and being good listeners, right? Really caring.
Yeah.
It's been a journey for me to help parents. I used to write blogs all the time. I still do, but I used to write this blog over and over, right? These are the 10 things you can do to help a friend or a family member who has an adopted child. And now I just put them all together in this book.
Right. Right. No, and it's so needed. I mean, I had hoped in my journey of about the same length as yours that it would become less needed, but I don't know that it has. I think that there's still a lot, parenting itself is kind of a loaded subject sometimes, and everybody's kind of an expert because we've all been parented, so we at least think that we are. And so yeah, it becomes this whole, in our social circles, it becomes difficult and hard. And if your child is not responding in what folks consider typical ways, and your family doesn't look typical because of what those behaviors are looking like, it can be a big problem. It can be a big problem in so many environments.
Yeah. And I also learned that a lot of friends and family members think that everything they're looking at should have a diagnosis and a medicine for. And that causes parents to think that way too. Like, okay, I guess there must
Let's go
be
get a pill for this. Yeah.
I need to find a diagnosis that fits all these behaviors, and you will be able to find 4, 5, 6 diagnoses that fit those behaviors, because complex developmental trauma looks like all those
All those
things,
things. Yes.
but
I
it's
would,
all those things.
yeah, I was just studying that very thing. I was doing a webinar on the intersection of trauma and neurodivergence, and it talked about how the complexity of diagnosing because of the symptom overlap. And that, ADHD and PTSD have the exact same symptoms, and other diagnoses when we're talking about, everything that we've mentioned here, there is symptom overlap. It makes diagnosing really tricky, really hard. And it kind of takes a niche person who understands all the different, scenarios. And
Yeah.
anyway, it really made me pause and go, well, no wonder there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of misunderstandings out there. There's a lot of judgment out there. So I love that you have brought this, back to talking about nobody needs judgment. That's not going to help anybody.
Right.
But we do need support. We do need accurate diagnoses. We need, treatment plans that will actually help.
Right. Yeah, and I just know that when I meet up with an adoptive parent in any capacity that I'm in these days, that they are on a mission, and I know that I was on this mission too. They're on a mission to find the right diagnosis.
Mm.
And they're just looking for it, there must be something, a diagnosis that fits this. And I'm like, okay, well, when you get that right diagnosis, then what? And they're
Yeah.
like, well, I don't know, then maybe there's a pill for it. Or I'm like, yeah, wouldn't that be great if complex developmental trauma had a pill for it and it really healed it, right? It made it go away. I'm like, so I always help people this way, or I try to help people this way. And I don't know if you experience this or not, is I just start with, let's just start with complex developmental trauma, because that's actually pretty easy to predict. If you had abandonment in childhood, early childhood, and some form of abuse, which is sometimes just traditional parenting can be abusive, right? You're
Right.
Absolutely.
Kids and turning them upside down and putting them in corners and locking them in rooms and doing all that because, traditional parenting gets escalated when you get frustrated. So almost all of our kids have complex developmental trauma. So let's start there and look at all those behaviors. And then let's talk about how you parent that. And let's parent that way. And then see what's left over in a couple of years. See what's left over. And if there are some things left over after you have really done a paradigm shift and you have really looked at connection over correction and you have done it, then you'll see what's left. And in 2 years, you will see what's left. Because if you do 2 years of therapeutic parenting, you're going to see a huge shift not 100% change, not at all.
Right.
The brain is still the brain, but things will be so much smoother, so much calmer. You will know your child inside and out, and you won't really be looking for a diagnosis anymore because you get it.
Right. Unless there's an obvious, unless something obvious is there, like a neurodiversity or like something else that just persists, and then you're able to identify it much easier.
And you have done absolutely no harm. Trauma sensitive parenting, trauma sensitive schools, any of that is helpful. It works for everybody, and it is going to be helpful. And it's exactly like what you said. Try it because you will see a change. There's just, you're going to help no matter what the situation truly is, if with or without a diagnosis.
Yeah.
Which is, exactly what I was thinking, because my adopted child is the youngest of our children, and we fancied ourselves some pretty good parents. But I know without a doubt that if I had been able to, why I would have done it, I don't know, but make the shift that I eventually made with her at the beginning of my parenting journey, I'd have been a better parent all along. I just would have been, right? And my kids would have gotten better parenting. And I watched them with their children, and they have taken some of that. So it makes a generational shift for to parent in this way. They are much more likely to talk to them in the loving way that you just described at the beginning of this podcast, when you were saying that instead of a command, it's a much more loving way of asking them to do things, and their kids respond in very different ways than I don't know that their kids are afraid of them the way I was afraid of my parents sometimes. And I don't see the harm in that. I only see that is that I'm loved, I'm lovable, and I can be loving thought process, which I just I appreciate that from you. That's such a clear thing. So if there was one piece of advice you could give to every parent of a child that from a difficult beginning, what's the one thing you want them to hear? It's hard to get it to one, isn't it?
I actually think I do have a thought about this. I think that it would behoove all parents, but definitely parents of children from difficult beginnings, who whenever they start their parenting journey, they start it with therapeutic parenting instead of waiting until there's a problem.
Yeah.
Because that's how people come to me. They come to me when it's blowing up in their face. And,
right.
and then come to find out it's been blowing up for a long time, but sort of in little ways here and there. And they thought they would grow out of it and it would be better. And that is generally just not really true about kids who have trauma in the early years. And so the sooner you therapeutically parent, the sooner the brain of your child will heal. And it can heal, right? If we can parent in a way that keeps the cortisol out of that prefrontal cortex, out of that executive function area, then their dysmaturity will not be so profound. So you won't end up with a 16-year-old who still has meltdowns like an 8-year-old. You'll have, maybe they will still have some dysmaturity, but not anything close to what it is if you do traditional parenting until you think there's a problem. And so then if you start that, let's say it happens at 12, when most things happen, and then you're like, oh, I need help. And then you start therapeutic parenting there. Well, it's not that it's too late, absolutely not too late, but also not very early. And so the brain has had a chance to spend 12 years developing in a fearful, flooded with cortisol way. If you can prevent that from the get-go, you will be doing yourself and your child a huge service.
I agree.
I think that is so important, C, because I've talked to adoptive parents who adopted their child at birth, and so sometimes they think that is going to preclude then any problems, right? But we know that's not the case. And so starting from minute one, day one, and then you're in the habit too, right? It's just the way it is. The earlier, the better. Wow. See, that's everything. That's so powerful.
It is. It's really healing. So I think sometimes people, the internet is a kind of incredible thing, but also a painful thing, because I listen to parents in chats around adoption and attachment challenge and trauma, and I just hear them say incredibly erroneous things about how it's too late. They're just like this. They're never gonna be different. And it's very hopeless. And I understand why. Because they haven't had the right kind of intervention early enough. And they still aren't getting the right kind of intervention. So they're still in it. So they think that, but it is not the truth. And for anybody to believe that the child is just disturbed and will never be better is not the truth. And you can start therapeutic parenting right at the beginning and change a lot of the negative trajectory in adolescence by just starting in a brain first healing kind of way.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't be misguided. Don't be misguided and wait too long.
Yeah, there is so much hope. I love
I
that.
agree. No, and I agree with you that that I'm hopeful because I know more people do know about it, but I'm also agree with you that I wish more parents were actively practicing in these ways. And and I think that you and ATN are so missionally aligned in this area because it is the way, it is the healing way. And it's and the more that we can all do separately and together to get this message out to families and to people who work with families, because they parents often have to be guided. They either have to be guided by signing up for your year-long program or by other people who are able to coach and support them in that way, to make that shift. And so I'm always taken by your work and how wonderful it is, and wish you the best in all of that. And I'm excited. I'm going to tell the audience that you will be with us in June at our conference, our Building Resilient Communities for Children conference, because we believe that this therapeutic parenting, love matters type program is really important, and that more families and people who work with caregivers should know about it. So we're excited about that as well.
Well, I really appreciate the invitation. I always like to present here, and I feel grateful that you think of my work this way, and I of course think of your work this way because we are so well aligned. But also because you're parent oriented. I'm parent oriented. I like kids. Don't get me wrong. But I think the healing starts with the parent, and
Yes.
parents need the healing, the help, the support to do the kind of therapeutic parenting they need to do to not need, a bunch of therapy in their lives for years and years and years on end.
Exactly.
So I
Yeah.
appreciate that that's what you do, and that's what I try to do too.
Awesome.
Well, we're going to link your book and your program in the show notes and how people can get a hold of you as an amazing ongoing resource. And we're just so glad that we had this time together today.
Yeah.
Me too, even though I'm not wearing red like you two.
Next time we'll send a memo.
Thank you so much, and good luck with your conference. I don't think you need luck. You already have it.
Awesome. Well, no, we've got all the professionals coming, so we're happy to we're going to be thrilled with getting to hear everybody. So, and thank you for our talk today. I know our listeners are probably are finding it really useful. Check out our show notes so that you can know more about Ce and her book and her programs, and we will catch you all on the next episode.
That's it for today's episode. Next time on Regulated and Relational, it's someone's birthday, and we're going to examine the challenges that birthdays bring and why we're often reflective when our own birthday rolls around. Don't miss this fun episode. A special thanks to Joe Kramer for donating the music. To learn more about the Attachment and Trauma Network, visit us at www.attachtrauma.org. I'm Lauren Cassis, and as always, thank you for listening.